Back-to-back 10-win seasons are ensuing for the Missouri Tigers, but a lot of talent has left Fairview Field. A lot to rebuild as the Missouri Tigers get set for the 2025 season. Hello, everyone. I'm Lucas Hill of SEC Live here at the Voice of College Football. Make sure you do us a favor. Hit the like, share, and subscribe button. Turn on that bell notification so that you are notified every time we post a new video here on South Carolina Live. Follow me on X at Lucas Hill SEC. With me today, none other than Missouri beat writer himself, Eli Hoff. Eli, good to see you, my friend. How are you today?
I'm doing well. We're in fall camp mode, getting close to being able to talk about real games soon. So I'm living the dream over here. How are you doing today?
Can't complain, my brother. Cannot complain. Coming off of back-to-back 10-win seasons, obviously. But Eli, I have said this plenty of times throughout the offseason. I always thought that, in my mind, and you can say that this is harsh, I thought Missouri was one of the worst 10-win teams in all of college football. Depending on what you had because of strength of schedule, quality wins, and how you won those games. Now you go into a 2025 season where you just lost your star quarterback who you could say has a case for being a top 10 quarterback in Missouri history. You look at a program leader like Eli Drinkwitz, who 2 years ago we were talking about maybe he could be the next coach out the window. Now 2 years later, he's one of the top coaches in the SEC. You have one of the top play callers in the SEC in Kirby Moore. Now you're in a quarterback battle with Penn State transfer Bo Pribula, and obviously who do you have with Sam Horn, who's a blue chip recruit? Talk to me about the quarterback battle between those two. And I know that you mentioned earlier on X that it was a very tight competition too.
Yeah, it's been a very close competition to this point. No starter named, and this is the second week of fall camp for Missouri. So you mentioned the two contenders there. You've got Bo Pribula, who came over from Penn State. He's someone who I think certainly popped onto folks' radar because he had a role for the Nittany Lions coming in as kind of a running focused wildcat type quarterback, except he can throw too, so it wasn't really wildcat. But he had a role to play for the Nittany Lions last year, and then really made headlines when he had to hop in the portal during their CFP run. That's that guy. He wound up at Missouri. And then Sam Horn's a really interesting college football player because he's a two-sport athlete. He also plays baseball, which isn't that unique. But the day Mizzou reported for fall camp, he also signed with the Los Angeles Dodgers. So this is probably it for him as far as college football is concerned, because I can't imagine a franchise like the Dodgers being too willing to let him play college football for forever. But he's here and competing for the quarterback job, very much in the mix. This is something where Eli Drinkwitz had said as recently as this morning, there hasn't been a ton of separation in this battle. Bo will have a couple good days. Sam will have a couple good days, and it seems to go back and forth. I'm at the point where I'm starting to wonder, is this resolved before the first game of the season, or does this go into the opener against Central Arkansas where, maybe Bo takes the first half, Sam takes the second half, and whoever plays better gets to be the starter. I don't know how that's going to look, but we do know that it's been a very close competition, and obviously it's high stakes because it's a quarterback battle. That's always going to be important.
When you talk about both of them, just talk to me about the different traits that both of these quarterbacks have. I know Bo Pribula is more of a mobile type of guy. I know that he can get outside the pocket and throw on the run. And Horn, obviously, he's got that mentality. He's got a strong arm. Obviously, the baseball arm, like you mentioned already, was in the Dodgers organization for a little while. Just talk to me about their different strengths, different weaknesses, what we can expect at the end of the day, and who do you think could be the starting quarterback, whether this drags on to the middle of the season or it's resolved by next week?
Yeah, well, I'll preface this by saying that the big thing with both these quarterbacks is that they're relative unknowns. So Sam Horn, for example, we know he has the arm. He can throw 98 miles per hour off a mound when he's pitching. So arm strength is a strength of his, for lack of a better way to put that. But he's only thrown 8 passes in college football. The most recent was in November of 2023. He didn't play at all last year because he underwent Tommy John surgery. So I've seen him make a ton of throws in practice against air. Haven't seen him make a whole lot against the defense, right? So we know he has a good arm. He's got great form. It looks good, but it's hard to put that in context just because we don't have that. Similarly, we know he's mobile enough to work in this Missouri system that needs a mobile quarterback. What's a little less clear is just, how quick he is, how elusive he is, because we just haven't gotten to see that. Now with Bo Prabila, we've seen a little bit more of him because he had that role at Penn State. We certainly know what he can do with his legs. He can do a lot of damage there. And he has enough of an arm. We don't know as much about the arm because he wasn't asked to throw a whole lot at Penn State. When he came in, most of the time it was going to be a run play, and the only play or the only game where he was really getting the full playbook at his disposal was part of a game against Wisconsin when Drew Aller got hurt. So we just don't really know for either of these guys how well their strengths are going to translate to the SEC. Like at a very basic level, it seems like, yeah, Sam Horn's got the arms and Bo Prabila's got the legs, and they've got a little overlap with what the other can do. It's just going to be tough to tell. So at this point, I'm leaning slightly towards Bo Prabila. I'd put it at like 60-40 in terms of Bo Prabila, that he has a little bit of an edge because he has a little more experience. I think he has a little more upside. He's a little bit more just Brady Cook-esque for, as much as that's a descriptor, which might not be helpful, but Missouri fans will understand that. Again, I think it remains to be seen whether he'll actually win the job, but I do think he has the better chance at this moment in time, and his skill set probably suits what Missouri's had out of the quarterback position over the last couple of years a little bit better.
Let's talk about the offense in general, apart from the quarterbacks. Obviously, you return just 3 starters from last year. You're losing your 2 top offensive tackles in Marcus Bryant and Armand Membu. You're losing your 2 top receivers in Luther Burden and Theo Weiss. Obviously, you're losing your 2 leading rushers in Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel. But a lot that you got in the portal as well that you're looking forward to. Everybody knows about Kevin Coleman and the impact that he made at Mississippi State on a pretty bad Mississippi State team last year. Not to mention you bring in Xavier Lloyd from Illinois State. 2 new starting tackles with Keegan Tross from Wake Forest and Johnny Williams, the 4th from West Virginia. But the one guy that I think is going to pop heads and, in my opinion, could be the go-to guy at the end of the day for Missouri is Ahmad Hardy from ULM, a guy that I got to personally watch last year. Deserved spot for him. Guy is a downhill dog. The guy can flat out run over dudes. He doesn't stop after initial contact. He's just a hard runner whenever you look at him on tape. Talk to me about what you've seen from Hardy, just being behind a fairly new offensive line that Missouri really hasn't had to replace since 23.
Yeah, Hardy, I think is the player for me personally. I think for probably a good chunk of the coaching staff and a good chunk of the fan base is the player a lot of people are the most excited to see, partly because of you see some of the tape from what he did down at ULM, but you look at the stats. He forced the second most missed tackles, in the country. The only player who forced more was Ashton Genty, right? That's pretty good company. He had 1,000 rushing yards after contact, 1,350 overall, 1,000 of those after contact. It's just crazy, the stats he put up. Now, of course, that was in a very different conference from the SEC, so we'll see how that translates. But the reviews from the practice field have been really, really strong with Ahmad Hardy. One of the big, I guess, assets that he brings is familiarity with both the inside and the outside zone, with just the navigating a zone blocking scheme, which is a skill for running backs. It's not as easy as just where the hole's going to be and you're just running there and trying not to get tackled. You have to make the reads. You have to feel the creases. You have to be able to get to the next level and understand that the second level hole might be different than the first level hole. All those nuances he learned down at ULM because ULM runs a lot of zone, and zone's a staple of the Mizzou offense. So I think that's going to help the transition a little bit. It certainly is what made him so appealing in the transfer portal. Beyond just the stats, it was also the familiarity with this. So I think that ought to help there. But you're right to pinpoint the questions on the offensive line. It's going to be new starters at both tackle spots. I do think at left tackle it'll probably be Javid Richardson instead of Johnny Williams the 4th. They're competing there, and it seems like Richardson's ahead. But it's going to be new starters there. It's the interior should be pretty strong. It's the edges that are a little bit more of a question mark. But if Hardy's as good as it seems like he could be, he might be able to take, even if the offensive line is only mediocre, he might still be able to turn that into pretty good production.
Obviously, when you look at the edge presence as well, I mean, when you talk about 2 tackles that I think can really make an impact, you talked about them running zone a lot. That's the reason why you have inside zone periods, because when I look at what Hardy did when they ran inside zone, I mean, it was a clear hole throughout the way. Even with a weak offensive line that ULM had, you were still able to break off big runs at the end of the day. I mean, that's what was so good about what he could do is that, I mean, like you mentioned, 1,000 yards after contact. I mean, how many other running backs are going to do that out in a conference like the Sun Belt? Now, I know it's the Sun Belt, but you have had success getting guys from the Sun Belt last year. Obviously, you got Utah, you got 2 from last year that ended up pretty freaking good, that went under the radar last year for Mizzou as well, and guys that you have to replace. So I know it seems like a kind of a rhetorical question, Eli, but could the Sun Belt be the new conference that you could see a lot of hidden talent from, especially at that running back position?
You know, it's interesting to think about it that way. I think potentially in because one of the things that I think we're seeing some SEC schools like is just guys who have volume experience. Ahmad Hardy has 1 year of college football under his belt and got upwards of I think 250 touches. He has so much of that worked out already that yes, it's going to be a big level up to the SEC, but he's already made the jump to college football. He's already made the jump to being a workhorse running back, handling that kind of volume. That's something that every player has to learn at some point. It's easier he learned it there and now can bring this to the SEC and focus on handling the physicality and just general uptick in quality of players he's going up against. So yeah, I think I can see that being helpful with running back in particular.
Looking at the season total, we'll get to the defense in a little bit, but when you look at the season as a whole, when you look at the schedule, what is the most important game that is going to define Missouri's season at the end of the day?
So I'm going to cheat and give you 2. The game that is the biggest or the one that's circled on the calendar is week 2 against Kansas, because this is the rivalry. The border war is back in football. Mizzou and Kansas haven't played each other on the gridiron since Mizzou left the Big 12 for the SEC after the 2011 season. So this one's been a long time coming. It'll be a heck of an atmosphere, a heck of a game. Just for that reason, it's an important game. Now, that said, that's one Mizzou should probably win. The game that I think will have be the best indicator, be kind of the bellwether game for what Mizzou is going to be this year, will be against South Carolina week 4. Mizzou and South Carolina have had some really good, really compelling games over the years. It feels like whichever team wins that game tends to be the one that goes on to have the better season. And so having that one a little bit earlier in the schedule, I think is going to be really, really important for both teams. I'm a fan of what South Carolina's built. I think Lenora Sellers is a heck of a quarterback. Even that game being in Columbia, Missouri, that's an advantage for Mizzou, but that's far from a guaranteed win. That's one where this isn't what you asked, but from a Mizzou end of things, if I'm putting like college game day watch of when the national attention could really be on Mizzou, I think it's that game. If both Mizzou and South Carolina can get through their first few games undefeated, that game to me just feels super, super important, and it comes early on enough that it will really be a tone setter for both programs.
You know, the tone setter is pretty interesting that you bring up the border war. Or the Civil War, I should say. Is it going to be just a home and home series just for this year and next year?
No, it's extended a little bit longer. It goes
good.
into the 2030s. Yep.
Good. It needs to be. It should have never been abolished. I mean, that should have been a non-conference schedule that they need to settle year after year after year. There's no way that you should have just eliminated that after Missouri left for the SEC. And recently, do you still feel like Missouri has been an outsider when it comes to the SEC? I know that you have success your 2 of your first 3 seasons there, but it seems like recently, I still feel like there's a lot of people that have not taken Missouri seriously, even though they've been in the SEC going on 15 years.
Yeah, I think so. And partly because there's a good number of times that I get this question, right? That this is still even a talking point, I think is an indicator of something with just Mizzou's perception or the perception of their standing in the SEC. It doesn't seem like it's been a perfect fit. One of the things that I'm personally kind of torn about, I'll hear people say, well, Mizzou's biggest rival is outside the conference, right? It's Kansas, who's in the Big 12. Frankly, most of the teams that are Mizzou's biggest rivals are outside of the SEC. The Arkansas rivalry has been a little force-fed. It hasn't been the most competitive. Now, Oklahoma coming into the league is a good rivalry for Mizzou, but that's, how much does Oklahoma belong in the SEC? I don't know. Maybe that's another talking point. But you do see other SEC schools, obviously, that have rivals outside of the conference. So I don't know how much that matters. it's always, for people who live in Missouri, that they understand this is kind of a broader geographic talking point. Is Missouri the Midwest or is it the South? I grew up in Minnesota, so Missouri feels Southern to me. My girlfriend grew up in Texas, so she thinks I'm crazy for thinking that, and this is the Midwest. Like, it's tough to place Missouri culturally in any given place. I think that the Tigers have been competitive enough in the SEC to deserve to not be written off as an outsider at this point. But at the same time, the perception of some of those fans is just going to be really difficult to change.
Going to the defensive side of the ball, you got to miss out on a lot of guys. I mean, you're losing a lot of talent on that defense. Obviously, losing Corey Flagg Jr., a guy that I thought was probably the leader of that Missouri defense. You talk about Williams Nwaneri, who's gone after 1 year, and you lose Johnny Walker to the NFL. But again, it was a very quiet but yet a very productive portal year for Missouri's defense. You get the Big 12 freshman of the year in Josiah Trotter. You get Jalen Catalon, who's been all over college football. Has been with Arkansas, Texas, UNLV, and now back in the SEC. When you look at where this defense is at, not to mention with Damon Wilson coming on to Mizzou with Tristan Newman and Dalen Carnell, who are among the league's best as well. It should be another top 20 unit. I know Corey Batoon having to take over for Blake Baker was a big ask, but overall, this was a very good Missouri defense last year that I thought was still dominant on the up front. Do we see a regression from last year to this year, or do we still see that steady improvement that Batoon did last year?
I think steady improvement, because to be honest with you, I think even with a couple of the losses on the defensive side, it was a net positive offseason. This Mizzou defense has more talent and certainly more depth than it did last year. So I think this is a group that has the upside to be in the top 4 or 5 in the SEC when it comes to defenses. You mentioned some of the edges there. Zion Young is back from last year. He had a scoop and score against Oklahoma and some big plays there. He's back. Nate Johnson, who had I think 7.5 sack season as a freshman at App State, he's in. That'll be the rotating duo at the field end spot. At boundary end, you've got Damon Wilson and Darius Smith, both Georgia transfers, who have that long, lean, twitchy, athletic, that modern defensive end build that you like to see. Ton of depth there, ton of depth at linebacker, getting Tristan Newsom back with the JUCO rule change. Josiah Trotter is just absolutely built. I mean, he's a crazy huge guy and had that All-American freshman season. Jalen Catalon was an All-American at UNLV and has been an All-SEC safety in the past. Every snap at cornerback is back, which is decent, but Mizzou does need to upgrade it at that position in terms of just better play. There's a lot of competitive depth all up and down this defense. There are a lot of positions where Mizzou is going to be able to rotate and frankly kind of needs to be able to maximize the amount of talent on the field. So I think there's more confidence in the defense than the offense, just given how many changes there are on the offensive side of the ball, and a lot of faith in Corey Batoon. He signed a contract extension after just 1 year in Columbia, so that's a pretty big endorsement for him. It seems like there's just a lot of good vibes going on with this defense.
A lot of juniors and seniors on this defense. Who do you think is the one that's going to be stepping up the most from year one going into their year two?
Yeah, I think getting to see, this is kind of an under the radar name, but Khalil Jacobs, who's a linebacker here, he might not start. He's a little bit more of a rotational guy. He'll come in as the will sometimes, but he's athletic enough that you'll see on third downs, Mizzou will often go into a 3-1-7 formation and pull a lineman and pull a linebacker to get a couple extra DBs on the field. And in that case, Khalil Jacobs is the one linebacker and has to cover a whole lot of ground. He does it really, really well. And he was at South Alabama with Corey Batoon, transferred over to follow his D coordinator here. And you can see why. He has a really unique skill set and unique role in this defense that suits what Mizzou wants to do really, really well. And Khalil Jacobs, it took him a couple games to get settled. It seemed like he was really coming along last year, and then boom, in that random game at UMass, he tore his pec and was done for the season. So he's back this year. It seems like he's leveled up in terms of his just intensity and dedication to this. He's really well respected in that linebacker group, really in that locker room at large. He's someone to know because I think he could be kind of an under the radar impact guy going into his second season at Mizzou.
As a whole, I have Missouri going 7-5. Is it fair for me to say that, or am I being too hard on what Missouri is bringing back and what they have in store for 25? Because I look at the schedule as a whole, it's a favorable schedule. Make no mistake about that. But I do have a lot of concerns when it comes to what you have to replace on the offensive line. I like Caden Green, but that's really, in my opinion, the only real experience that you have up front as a whole. But I think a 7-5 and 8-4 is achievable. Back to another bowl game. What has been the vibe around Missouri and what their expectations going into the season, just from the fan base perspective?
Yeah, this is interesting because I don't think it's unfair to pick 7-5 because the Vegas line for wins this season, that's set at 7.5, right? So that and that tends to be, I think, quite a bit lower than what this fan base feels is possible. I think if you were to poll Missouri fans and ask them to be honest, I think most would probably set the line at 8.5 and think it's probably more a matter of 8 or 9 wins versus 7 or 8, which maybe isn't that big of a difference, but I don't know. Every game counts for so much, every win counts for so much. So I think fans are not necessarily expecting this team to have the quality of last year. Like going into last season, there were Mizzou fans who thought, and rightfully thought, that there was a very real path to the college football playoff. That path is still there this year, given how favorable the schedule is. But I don't think there's the same expectation that Mizzou's going to take advantage of it and make it there. I think if Mizzou goes and wins 8 games or wins 9 games this season, but isn't really in the playoff mix, fans will still understand that and appreciate that as raising the floor of this. So just because it's such a transitional year, especially on offense, it'll be interesting to see. My personal thought is I'd set the line at 8.5, but again, I can't argue with Vegas because they know more than I do and intend to win more than I do.
We'll see what happens for the Missouri Tigers going into 2025. Eli Hoff, Missouri Tigers beat writer for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Check him out on X at by Eli Hoff, BYALIHOFF. Eli, thank you for the time, brother. We look forward to seeing you real soon, and let's have a great rest of the week. We're excited for football season coming very soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.